My brother called me at 6:14 on a Tuesday morning and said, "You need to send me half your bonus before the end of the week." Not "can you help me?" Not "I'm struggling." Not even "would you consider it?" No. He said it like he was discussing a utility bill I forgot to pay. I remember sitting up in bed so fast my neck cramped. My apartment was still dark, rain tapping softly against the windows, my phone glowing against the blanket, while his voice came through cold and confident. I laughed at first because I genuinely thought he was joking. Then he said, "Don't do that dramatic fake laugh thing. Mom already told me how much you got." And something inside me immediately tightened. Because that sentence told me two things. First, my mother had shared private financial information I explicitly asked her not to share. Second, they'd already discussed my money before talking to me. I pushed the blanket off and stood up slowly, trying to keep my voice calm. "How do you even know I got a bonus?" "Oh, please," he scoffed. "Mom said your company gave out annual performance bonuses, and yours was huge. You're single, Emily. I have 3 kids." There it was, the sentence that had followed me my entire life. You're single. As if being unmarried meant my work mattered less. As if not having children made my life some endless vacation. As if every exhausting hour I spent clawing my way through my career existed to subsidize my older brother's choices. I walked into the kitchen in complete silence while he kept talking. "You know daycare alone is killing us right now. Ava needs braces. Tyler's asthma meds got more expensive. You have no idea what it costs to raise kids." I stared at my coffee machine while rage slowly crawled up my spine. Because he was right about one thing. I didn't know what it cost to raise kids, but I knew exactly what it cost to become successful in my family. Everything. I was the child who got overlooked quietly instead of abused loudly, which honestly made it harder to explain to other people. There were no bruises, no screaming, no dramatic movie moments, just years and years of being treated like I mattered slightly less. My brother Jason was the sun in our household. Everything orbited him. His sports trophies covered the living room walls, his report cards got framed, his mistakes got defended, his failures became stress. Meanwhile, my achievements were treated like expected maintenance. When I got accepted into one of the best business schools in the state, my dad nodded and said, "Good. Keep your scholarships coming." When Jason barely passed community college after changing majors 4 times, my mother cried with pride at dinner because school has always been harder for him. Harder for him. That phrase bought him forgiveness for everything. When he maxed out 2 credit cards before turning 24, my parents paid them off. When I worked 3 jobs during college while graduating with honors, my father told relatives, "Emily's independent. She doesn't need help." People hear that and think it sounds complimentary. It's not. In families like mine, independent means we can neglect you without guilt. Jason got softness. I got expectations. And somehow, even after all those years, part of me still kept hoping things would change. That's the embarrassing part. Not the bonus, not the money. Hope. Hope makes intelligent women tolerate things they'd never accept from anyone else. I finally said, "You're not getting half my bonus." Silence. Then, a short laugh. "You haven't even heard the amount. I don't care if it's $10. Wow." He muttered. That's selfish. Selfish. That word hit me like acid, because selfish people don't spend years paying for birthday gifts their parents forgot. Selfish people don't cover grocery bills quietly when their mother says money is tight. Selfish people don't answer midnight panic calls from family members who only remember them during emergencies. But somehow, the person with boundaries always becomes the selfish one. Jason sighed dramatically. "You make 6 figures, Emily. You have no idea what I make." Mom told me enough. Again. Mom told me. I felt physically sick. I told her not to discuss my finances. Oh my God, who cares? He snapped. "We're family." That sentence. That weaponized little sentence. We're family. In my family, those words never meant love. They meant compliance. We're family, so don't say no. We're family, so stop making things uncomfortable. We're family, so sacrifice quietly while everyone else takes. I leaned against the counter and closed my eyes. I'm not giving you my money. His tone changed instantly. Gone was the casual entitlement. Now came the guilt. So my kids suffer while you sit alone in your luxury apartment? I almost laughed again. Because my luxury apartment was a one-bedroom condo I bought after spending 8 years sleeping 4 hours a night building my career. Those years weren't glamorous. Nobody saw me crying in office bathrooms after 16-hour workdays. Nobody saw me reheating ramen at midnight while studying for certifications. Nobody saw me cancel relationships because I was too exhausted to function. People only notice women's success after it becomes visible. They never respect the price paid to achieve it. I worked for this bonus, I said quietly. And I work too. You work part-time, Jason, because childcare is expensive. You and Melissa chose 3 kids. And you chose your career over family. That one landed exactly where he intended, because women hear that accusation differently. Men get praised for ambition, women get interrogated for it. Before I could respond, another voice suddenly entered the call. My mother. Emily? I actually pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it. She'd been listening. The entire time. Something cold moved through my chest. Are you seriously on speakerphone? Oh, stop being dramatic, she said immediately. We're trying to solve a family problem. Family problem. Interesting phrasing. Because nobody called it a family success when I earned the bonus. But suddenly, it became a family problem when I wanted to keep it. My mother's voice softened into that manipulative sweetness I knew too well. Honey, your brother is under enormous pressure. So am I. You don't have children depending on you? No. I just have myself. The silence after that sentence felt sharp. My mother exhaled heavily. You know what I mean. I did know what she meant. My life counted less because no one else directly relied on me. Single women become public property in families like this. Everyone assumes your time, money, and energy are available for redistribution. Meanwhile, married siblings get treated like struggling heroes for surviving responsibilities they voluntarily chose. I asked quietly, how much did Jason tell you he wanted? He only asked for half. Only half. Only. Like we were discussing pizza slices. I laughed again, but this time it sounded broken even to me. You both already decided my money belongs to him. No one said belongs, my mother replied quickly. But you think I owe him? You're in a better position. I'm in a better position because I worked for it. And he works hard too. There it is, Jason muttered. You think you're better than me. I closed my eyes because this was always the trap. If I acknowledged my effort, I was arrogant. If I defended my boundaries, I was selfish. If I succeeded too visibly, I was cold. Meanwhile, Jason could demand thousands of dollars from me before sunrise and still somehow remain the victim. I finally said the thing I'd spent 32 years swallowing. Jason, your financial problems are not my responsibility. Dead silence. Then, my mother whispered, horrified Emily, as if I'd slapped him, as if basic adult accountability was cruelty. Jason's voice dropped low. You know what? Forget it. Keep your money. But I knew that tone. Nothing was forgotten. The call ended 2 minutes later. I stood alone in my kitchen listening to rain hit the windows while my coffee turned cold beside me. And deep down, I knew this wasn't about money anymore. It was about hierarchy. Families like mine survive because everyone silently agrees to assigned roles. Jason was the needy golden child. I was the competent backup generator. The second I stopped performing my role, the entire system panicked. And panic makes entitled people dangerous. The next few days proved it. My mother started texting constantly. Your brother is devastated. Melissa is crying. The kids feel the tension. The family is heartbroken. Interesting how nobody cared whether I felt heartbroken. I ignored most of the messages until Thursday night when my father called. Now that scared me. My dad rarely involved himself emotionally. He preferred quiet authority, the kind of man who could make you feel guilty with a single disappointed stare. I answered cautiously. "Hi, Dad. You embarrassed your brother. Straight to it. No hello, no congratulations on the biggest professional achievement of my life. Just accusation." I sat on my couch slowly. He demanded my money. He asked for help. He demanded half. You could have handled it with more grace. Grace. Women are always asked for grace while being disrespected. I rubbed my forehead. Did anyone ask whether I was comfortable discussing my finances? You're making this transactional. I almost laughed at the absurdity. They literally calculated percentages of my bonus. You know Jason's struggling. So? The word escaped before I could soften it. My father went silent. Then came the disappointment. You used to care about family. There it was. The oldest manipulation tactic in existence. Convince the person setting boundaries that they're abandoning love itself. I whispered, "I'm tired, Dad. We're all tired. No, I mean I'm tired of this." Long silence. Then his voice hardened. Your brother has responsibilities bigger than himself. One day you'll understand. That sentence sat in my chest long after the call ended. One day you'll understand. As if motherhood was the only valid form of sacrifice. As if my exhaustion counted less because it funded only my own survival. I spent that entire weekend angry in ways I couldn't fully explain. Not explosive anger. Worse. The quiet kind. The kind that forces you to revisit memories you spent years minimizing. Suddenly I remembered every Christmas where Jason got expensive gifts while I got practical ones because you're more mature. Every birthday where I helped clean up while everyone praised him for showing up late. Every family dinner where my career became a punchline. You'll work yourself into an early grave. No man wants a woman who's always at the office. What's the point of all that money if you go home alone? People think favoritism is obvious. Sometimes it's microscopic. Tiny cuts over decades. So small individually that you feel crazy reacting to them. Until one day you realize you've been emotionally bleeding for years. 2 weeks later, my parents invited the entire family to Sunday dinner. Which was strange. We hadn't done a full family dinner in months. The second I walked into their house, I knew it was an ambush. Jason and Melissa were already there. Melissa wouldn't look at me. My mother was overcompensating with fake cheerfulness. The dining room smelled like rosemary chicken in tension. I should have left immediately. Instead, I sat down. Because some stupid, hopeful part of me still believed maybe they wanted resolution. Maybe they wanted understanding. Maybe they finally saw me. What an idiot I was. Dinner lasted 23 minutes before my father cleared his throat. We need to settle this. There it was. Not discuss. Settle. Like I was withholding community property. Jason folded his arms dramatically. I didn't want this to become a thing. I stared at him. You demanded half my bonus before sunrise. But sure, you're the victim here. My mother reached across the table. Emily, honey, nobody's saying you have to give him half. Oh? We thought maybe 30% would be fair. I physically stopped chewing. My father nodded like this was reasonable. Enough to help without hurting you. The room blurred for a second. Because they had discussed this. Negotiated it. Calculated it. Without me. I looked around the table slowly. You people actually sat down and budgeted my money. Melissa suddenly spoke for the first time. It's not like you'll even notice it gone. That sentence. God, that sentence changed something in me permanently. Because people only say things like that when they genuinely believe your labor belongs to them more than it belongs to you. I set my fork down carefully. I'm done. Jason scoffed. Unbelievable. No, I said quietly. What's unbelievable is how comfortable all of you are treating me like an ATM. My mother gasped. There's no need to be cruel. Cruel. Again. Always cruel when I reacted. Never cruel when they demanded. I stood up. Then my father said the sentence that finally shattered whatever loyalty I still had left. If your grandmother were alive, she'd be ashamed of you. Everything stopped. My grandmother practically raised me while my parents focused on Jason. She was the one person who saw me clearly. The one person who told me my ambition wasn't selfish. She died 3 years earlier. And hearing him weaponize her memory against me, something inside me went still. Dangerously still. I looked directly at him. Don't use Grandma to manipulate me. She believed in family. She believed in fairness. You've changed, my mother whispered. No. That was the problem. I hadn't changed nearly enough. I walked out before dessert. My phone exploded for days afterward. Texts from Jason. Texts from my mother. Long guilt paragraphs from Melissa. Eventually, even extended relatives started contacting me, which meant my parents had launched a family-wide smear campaign. My Aunt Diane called and said, "Your brother says you refused to help his children, not refused to surrender my bonus, not refused unreasonable demands. No, I refused to help children. Do you see how language gets weaponized? I spent 14 months barely speaking to my family after that. 14 months of silence. And honestly, it was peaceful. Painful, but peaceful. At first, I kept expecting apologies, then explanations, then accountability. None came. Instead, I heard through relatives that Jason kept complaining about me constantly. Apparently, I'd become obsessed with money. Ironically said by the man demanding someone else's. Meanwhile, my life quietly improved without them. My apartment became calmer. My anxiety decreased. I stopped flinching every time my phone buzzed. Therapy helped too. That part matters. Because my therapist said something during our 3rd session that rewired my brain. She said, "Emily, your family assigned you value based on usefulness, not humanity." I cried so hard after that session I had to pull over driving home. Because she was right. The only time my family celebrated me was when I was providing something. Money, labor, emotional support, organization, reliability. But me as a person, my feelings, my exhaustion, my dreams, those were secondary. Around month 6 of no contact, something unexpected happened. I received a letter from a law office. At first I thought it was junk mail. Then I saw my grandmother's name. My hands literally started shaking. Apparently my grandmother had created a private investment account years before her death. I knew she'd helped Jason occasionally and paid part of my tuition once, but I had no idea about this. The account had been managed quietly through a family attorney, and according to the letter, I was the primary beneficiary. Not Jason. Me. I sat at my dining table, rereading the document over and over while my heartbeat thundered in my ears. The amount wasn't billionaire-level dramatic, but it was substantial. Life-changing substantial. Enough to pay off my condo completely, enough to invest heavily, enough to breathe. I immediately assumed there had been a mistake. There had to be. People like me don't get chosen in families like mine. But after meeting with the attorney, the truth became painfully clear. My grandmother intentionally left the majority of the account to me because she believed I'd spent my entire life being overlooked. Those were almost her exact words. I remember staring at the attorney while tears rolled down my face. Then came the second shock. Jason apparently knew the account existed. He just assumed he'd inherit it. The attorney explained that after my grandmother's death, my parents repeatedly contacted the office asking about distributions. But because of legal confidentiality, details were withheld until the proper release period, meaning my family spent years expecting money that was never theirs. And suddenly, everything made more sense. The obsession with my finances, the entitlement, the panic when I refused. They never saw me as an equal family member. I was a financial resource that failed to cooperate. The attorney asked carefully, "Would you like us to notify your family now that distribution is proceeding?" I stared out the office window for a long moment. Then I said, "Not yet." That's when the silence transformed into strategy. For the next several months, I learned things, important things, like how often my parents had quietly bailed Jason out financially, how many loans he'd defaulted on, how much debt they'd hidden from relatives, how often my grandmother had privately defended me after family gatherings. Apparently, she once told my mother, "One day Emily will stop tolerating this family, and you'll deserve it." I wish I could have heard her say that. I wish I'd known someone saw it while she was alive. Then came the event that changed everything. My parents sued me. Yes, actually sued me. Not for the bonus directly. Their lawyer wasn't stupid enough for that. Instead, they claimed I had verbally committed ongoing financial assistance to Jason's family and caused intentional emotional and financial harm by withdrawing support unexpectedly. When I read the filing, I laughed so hard I scared myself, because the audacity was almost artistic. But underneath the laughter was grief, real grief. Because normal families don't do this. Normal parents don't legally attack daughters for refusing financial exploitation. My lawyer, Denise, was incredible. Sharp, calm, absolutely terrifying in heels. After reading everything, she leaned back in her chair and said, "Your family thinks guilt works on everyone because it worked on you for 30 years. That sentence burned. Because it was true. The lawsuit itself was weak, embarrassingly weak. But that wasn't the point. The point was pressure. Public shame. Punishment. They wanted me exhausted enough to settle quietly. Instead, Denise discovered something fascinating. Over the years, my parents had transferred significant amounts of money between family accounts under questionable pretenses tied to my grandmother's estate expectations. Nothing criminal exactly, but messy enough to become deeply uncomfortable under legal scrutiny, especially once inheritance documentation surfaced, especially once timelines got examined carefully, especially once a judge started asking questions. And then came the day of the hearing. I'll never forget that courtroom. The stale recycled air, the dull wood benches, the sound of papers shifting softly. Jason wouldn't look at me at first. My mother looked exhausted. My father looked furious. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't scared of any of them. That realization alone felt revolutionary. The hearing began predictably. Their attorney painted me as a cold, financially privileged woman who abandoned struggling family members after creating dependency. I almost admired the performance. Almost. Then Denise stood up. And everything changed. She spoke calmly at first, methodically, walking through financial records, text messages, timelines, patterns. She showed how every gift or support expectation flowed one direction only, toward Jason, toward my parents, never toward me. Then she introduced the inheritance documents. I watched confusion spread across my family's faces in real time. Jason frowned first, then my mother stiffened. Then my father's entire posture changed. The judge adjusted his glasses. Denise approached the bench and said, "Your Honor, there appears to be a broader context motivating this litigation." And then the judge read my grandmother's name aloud. Everything stopped. I swear the air itself changed. The courtroom suddenly felt smaller, sharper. My mother's face went completely white. Jason looked like someone punched him in the stomach, because in that exact moment they realized Grandma chose me. Not him, me, the invisible daughter, the reliable backup child, the one expected to surrender everything quietly. I'll never forget Jason whispering, "What?" Not angry, not loud, just stunned, like his entire understanding of reality cracked open. Denise continued speaking while their attorney visibly panicked. She explained the trust structure, the beneficiary designation, the timeline, the repeated attempts by family members to access information improperly. And then came the final blow. Denise presented evidence showing their lawsuit coincidentally began shortly after they learned unofficially that estate distributions might not favor Jason. The judge's expression hardened immediately. My father finally spoke. "This is irrelevant." The judge looked directly at him. "It appears highly relevant." Silence. Pure devastating silence. Jason finally looked at me fully for the first time in over a year, and I saw it. Not sadness, not regret, betrayal. Because golden children genuinely believe love belongs to them by default. He truly thought Grandma would choose him no matter what. Even after decades of irresponsibility, even after entitlement, even after everything. The hearing ended quickly after that. Their case collapsed almost instantly once motive scrutiny intensified. Outside the courtroom, my mother chased me down the hallway. "Emily, wait." I turned slowly. She looked terrified. Not emotional. Terrified. "There's been a misunderstanding." I almost laughed. "A misunderstanding. That's what 30 years of favoritism becomes when exposed publicly." My father approached next, jaw tight. "You hid this inheritance." I stared at him. "You sued me. That's not the point. It's exactly the point." Jason finally spoke from behind them. "You knew Grandma left it to you?" "Not until recently." His eyes narrowed instantly. "You're lying." There it was again. The inability to imagine I could ever be chosen honestly, because accepting the truth meant accepting that maybe, just maybe, the family narrative had been wrong all along. I said quietly, "She saw things more clearly than you did." That sentence hit like a grenade. My mother started crying immediately. Actual tears. But the strange thing was, I felt nothing. Not satisfaction. Not guilt. Just distance. Like watching strangers collapse inside a glass box. Jason stepped closer. "She owed those kids something." "No." "Listen carefully. Not we deserved. Not I deserved." He still framed it around his children because he knew that argument sounded morally safer. But I was finally done falling for emotional camouflage. "She owed no one anything," I said calmly. "It was her money. You're seriously keeping all of it?" The irony almost made me smile. After demanding my bonus, after suing me, after smearing me to relatives, he still believed access to my finances was negotiable. I looked him directly in the eyes. "Yes." My father's face hardened with disgust. "You've become greedy," I laughed softly. "No. I've become unavailable, and honestly, that was the moment everything ended. Not dramatically, not explosively, just permanently. The family system finally broke because I stopped feeding it. Over the next several months, relatives slowly learned the truth. Interesting how narratives change once legal documents enter the conversation. Suddenly, people became quieter around me. More careful. Some apologized indirectly, others avoided me entirely. My Aunt Diane called one evening and whispered, "I didn't realize how bad it was." That sentence hurt more than the original betrayal somehow, because it confirmed what I'd always suspected. People saw it. They just benefited from staying silent. Jason tried contacting me repeatedly after the case collapsed. Sometimes angry, sometimes apologetic, sometimes manipulative. One voicemail said, "The kids miss their aunt," as if children were emotional hostages. Another said, "Mom's health is getting worse from stress," as if accountability caused illness. Then came the saddest message of all. "I don't understand why money changed you. Money didn't change me. Money revealed them." That's the truth nobody likes discussing. Financial boundaries expose relationship realities fast. People who love you adapt. People who benefit from you retaliate. I eventually bought a small house 2 hours away from my hometown. Nothing extravagant. Quiet neighborhood. big kitchen, sunlight across hardwood floors every morning. Peace. Real peace. The kind where your nervous system slowly learns it doesn't have to stay braced for impact. Sometimes I still think about my grandmother, especially in the garden. She loved gardening, loved growing things patiently. I think she understood something I didn't back then. Healthy things cannot survive where they're constantly depleted. Eventually, you have to replant yourself somewhere gentler. My mother sent one final letter about 6 months ago, handwritten, 3 pages, most of it focused on family healing, very little focused on accountability. That told me everything, because reconciliation without accountability is just another demand for silence. I never responded. And before someone says that sounds cold, understand this. Forgiveness and access are not the same thing. You can release bitterness without reopening the door. That lesson saved my life. The strangest part is how calm I feel now. For years I thought justice would feel explosive, victorious, like screaming in someone's face after surviving mistreatment. But real justice feels quieter. It feels like sitting in your own home without anxiety twisting your stomach. It feels like checking your bank account without guilt. It feels like answering no one. It feels like finally understanding your worth was never supposed to be negotiated. Sometimes women get trained so thoroughly to absorb emotional labor that boundaries feel immoral, especially with family, especially when motherhood gets weaponized against us. You start believing your success exists to compensate for other people's choices. You start believing exhaustion is selfish unless it serves someone else. You start believing love requires surrender. It doesn't. Love without respect becomes consumption, and some families consume the strongest daughter until there's nothing left. I almost let that happen to me. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd handed Jason the money immediately. Honestly, it wouldn't have ended there. Entitlement expands to fill every available inch. Next, it would have been school tuition. Then, medical bills. Then, mortgage help. Then, emergencies. Because the problem was never the bonus amount. The problem was that my family believed access to me was automatic. The bonus simply exposed it. And maybe that exposure was necessary. Painful, humiliating, lonely, but necessary. Because once you see the system clearly, you can never unsee it. You stop mistaking guilt for love. You stop confusing usefulness with worth. You stop performing loyalty for people who would never sacrifice equally for you. That clarity costs a lot, but staying blind costs more. Last month, I ran into an old family friend at a grocery store. She looked awkward immediately and said, "I heard things got messy." Messy. Such a polite word for emotional warfare. I smiled gently and said, "No, things got honest. And honestly, that's the best description I have for any of it. Things finally got honest. About favoritism, about entitlement, about what happens when the dependable daughter stops absorbing everyone else's consequences. The funny thing is, I still love my family in some distant, complicated way. Trauma doesn't erase attachment overnight. But love alone cannot sustain relationships where respect never existed. That realization took me decades. If you're listening to this while questioning yourself because your family calls you selfish for having boundaries, hear me carefully. People benefiting from your silence will always describe your voice as cruelty. That doesn't make them right. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is disappoint people who only loved your usefulness. Sometimes peace costs relationships. Sometimes choosing yourself feels like grief before it feels like freedom. But freedom does come. Slowly, quietly. Like sunlight entering a room you forgot could be warm again. And if you've ever been treated like the family bank account, the emotional support animal, the strong one expected to sacrifice endlessly, I hope you remember this. You are allowed to keep what you earned. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to stop funding people who confuse access with entitlement. and you are absolutely allowed to walk away from anyone who treats your boundaries like betrayal. If this story hit a little too close to home, then unfortunately, you probably understand exactly how painful family favoritism can become behind closed doors. And if you've ever been the daughter expected to give more, tolerate more, forgive more, and shrink more just to keep the peace, I hope you never forget this feeling when someone tries to guilt you for protecting yourself again. Because the moment you finally realize your value doesn't decrease when you stop sacrificing yourself for ungrateful people, that's the moment your life finally begins.